when to start.
If we're trying to contact them due to the importance of this, I think we should wait and see what they have to say and give it a few more minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody doing okay?
Yep.
Doing well. Yeah. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
Not too bad. It's a good place to be, right?
It's good as it's gonna get today.
Went and had
But we can go ahead and get started. We should have a quorum. If we want to start, I'll let.
Yes, that's fine, Pam. And we're gonna call the roll. And one of the things I wanted everyone to understand that's on this committee, everybody, we hope to reach everything by consensus, but everybody has the same number of weighted votes or so. So I wanted everybody to understand that and everybody's opinion is important. And we want to listen to everyone. So if you want to call the roll for attendance purposes, Pam, you may do so at this time.
Thank you. Chair Stevens?
Present.
Co-Chair Witten?
Present.
Regent Bogard?
present.
Dr. Castle?
Here.
Regent Fletcher? Regent Hamilton?
Present.
Regent Herdink?
Here.
Regent Martin? Regent Martin just joined. Regent Young? Excuse me, Dr. Young.
Present.
You can be both. And Regent Martin?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. We may proceed.
Okay, you didn't call. You call Dr. Castle? Or did I hear him say yes or no?
I did call him.
Okay, he was all right. I haven't. All right, that's fine. The first one will go to the agenda, and the process is that I'm going to let Hannah talk a little bit about our committee visit with the consultants, and then Brianna, when we actually get into the agenda items, I'll let Brianna, we'll discuss some of those. I mean, she has the lead on some of those. So Hannah, if you would, very briefly, us with our conversation with the consultants.
Yes, sir. So our consultants are the Association of Governing Boards, AGB, and we are specifically working with James McCormick and Janice Fitzgerald. They could not be here today due to prior obligations. They're actually traveling. But they have been very engaged. We have met with them numerous times through Teams, and we've exchanged emails and text. They will be joining us at our next meeting to really get down to the nitty gritty of the search process and determine the characteristics that we want in our next president. However, we wanted to just get this meeting underway as our first meeting, get a few things, kind of the groundwork completed and out of the way. So they will be joining us for future meetings, and they are really taking over the search as they have done for hundreds, if not of thousands of searches before. They are very nationally well known and do this all the time. So we will be leaning on them heavily to guide us through this process. But again, unfortunately, they couldn't be with us today. They will be with us for the next search meeting.
Thank you. And I know that we have some items that Pam is going to discuss but Brianna, I think one of the items that you and I talked about, and I talked with the consultants about, is the qualifications. And right now, Pam, you correct me if I'm wrong, the qualifications are that you have to have a doctorate degree. It doesn't have to specifically be in education, but a related field. And they said that one of the comments that we discussed with them is that that was what our board policy says. And if we change that, then have to go back to the board. So, Brianna, if you want to discuss that for me, please.
Sure, Chair Stevens. One of the things that we had discussed in our previous board meeting was just, what that would mean and what that would look like when we were discussing other things, among other things, I guess I should say. So Chair Stevens and I have had conversations, and it was kind of the will we felt of the board to kind of retain that qualification based on the existing policy. In particular, right, if we start moving the goalposts now, then we're going to kind of revert back to square one. So just moving forward, that would stay in place. That is the recommendation that I have made to Chair Stevens. And we had some conversations about that. I know that some other things were tossed around, but I think in the end, that was the consensus that we felt, and we hoped that as presenting that to this group, that you all would feel the same, so that we can take that and go and move forward instead of kind of hawing around and going back and forth. So,
and then I'll ask Hannah and Pam to elaborate on that from the consultant standpoint, and then we'll be able to, any of the committee members can make any comments they want to. Hannah, if you or Pam, either one want to go first, maybe Pam, you need to express our present policy and what it would entail if we changed it, what the procedure we have to go through.
Okay, so this isn't on our agenda, so I'm going to need to have a motion, actually, that the change or acceptance of the policy as is be added to the motion, to the agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
And if I could have a roll call vote. I'm sorry to put you all through this, but I want to make sure that we are in order here. Chair Stevens.
And aye.
Chair Co-Chair Whitten.
aye.
Regent Bogard. Dr. Castle.
Aye.
Regent Fletcher. Regent Hamilton.
Aye.
Regent Herdink.
Yes.
Regent Martin.
Yes.
And Dr. Young.
Aye.
All right, the vote of the members present is unanimous. The motion carries. The agenda is revised to include discussion of accepting the policy as it is currently written or revising. The floor is open for discussion. Yes.
Parliamentarian Duncan, I'm sorry, but if you would, I think Chair Stevens did ask, but for those who may be watching, if you could state briefly what the policy is and then state that, if you don't mind, to summarize what Chair
Yes.
is asking.
So the board policy actually requires in the structural makeup of KCTCS, it is board policy 1.5, I believe, and it is in one of the sections, section 3, A and B. It does go through the qualifications for the president of KCTCS as well as for college presidents. And to be able to be eligible to apply for and meet the minimums for the KCTCS president, which is what we are talking about right now, the president or the successful candidate must have a doctoral degree. Now, what type of doctoral degree is not specified. It simply says a PhD, an EDD, or other doctoral degree. In addition, there are requirements for the KCTCS president, the successful applicant, to have a certain amount of experience, and that experience would be experience to include a sufficient number of years that would provide time to learn and improve upon the leadership skills necessary to lead a complex system of colleges, providing a wide spectrum of general education, technical training, and workforce education. And then the third qualification is a variety of experience that assists the president in developing an understanding of the elements necessary to ensure the KCTCS fulfills its multi-factored role as established in KRS 164.003, paragraph 2, subsection E. And that would be that we have 3 primary functions: transfer education, 2-year degrees, workforce readiness, and also lifelong learning. But the main discussion has focused on whether the president should have, as required in policy, an earned doctoral degree from an accredited institution of higher education. If this committee chooses to disregard this policy, they will need to have an official revision of the policy. So that would mean actually taking a revision to the board, but you need to determine whether that this policy will stand as is, or you would recommend a revision to make this a preferred qualification. So that is the background of that, and I will turn it back over to Co-Chair Witten or Co-Chair Stevens.
Brianna?
Yes. So with all of that being said, and thank you, Pam. It is, as I mentioned before, I think kind of just the will of Chair Stevens and myself that this kind of move forward. Not only because I feel like that it is the right thing to do, but also because, if we had wanted to actually change this policy, this could have been something that we should have probably visited when we were discussing KCTCS presidents and the requirement for that doctoral degree, which we did have that discussion a few meetings back. So at this point, it is my preference, and I believe, Chair Stevens, if I'm speaking over you, you please say otherwise. I believe it is our will to move forward, to continue to progress with the requirement as it is. No revision required.
And I would
Comment?
note, I'm sorry, I would note for the record that Regent Fletcher is currently in attendance.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the committee members before we vote? Or not vote,
did
or
see-
we? Yes. See any hands, Pam or Hannah?
I do not, oh, there
I
is a
think Barry had his hand
There
up.
we go. Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I think it was good that we had a healthy discussion about that. I agree. Let's leave it as is. But I think when we look at the experience, and that we need to keep that at the forefront as well as the academics, because we're both, we want that person to be well-rounded. So I think it was good that we still had that discussion. But I also agree that we need to move forward and leave it as it is. If we wanted to change it, we should have changed it before.
Dr. Young?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that on behalf of the presidents, and I think Dr. Castle can agree with me, that this is something that we strongly agree with, and I do greatly appreciate the fact that we will leave that particular qualification in place.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, my question is for Regent Whitten. Did you hear any feedback or comments from any staff, or not staff, faculty, like maybe faculty senate or anything like that, and their opinions?
Yeah, great question. And not the faculty senate as a whole, Joe, but mostly from faculty that I've come in constant contact with every day. Just the idea that I think the assumption is that it would stay the same. Chair Stevens and I have had discussion about his past professional life, right? And we kind of liken it to the idea of a school superintendent that doesn't have that certification walking in the building and trying to run a local education, authority. And then that's just not something that we want either. I understand within our discussion the need to have somebody who can handle it all, right? And we don't like to say that the system or KCTCS is a business, but we are, in fact, a business. But we are also still, in the business of academics. So, when you have the leader at the top, I think it's important to have the requisite experience there. And as Barry said, I agree. In all facets, I think moving forward, when we begin looking at candidates, that's important to make sure that we're looking at each candidate holistically and what they can bring to the table.
I would ask Hannah, there was some comment made, and Hannah, if you can remember it better than I can, that they made the search firm made some comments about that, right? In reference to, as Pam may have said, there's a lot of ways that you can, I won't say get around it, but encourage people. So you explain that, how they said that?
Sure. I think that the question that the search firm was presented with was, is this generally a requirement that they see in their searches? And they had commented that, post-COVID, the pool of candidates seems to be shrinking, especially in higher education. You see a lot of the retirement wave, and the people who would be qualified for this level of position seems to be very small. With that being said, our policy is our policy, and if it is our policy, they are very willing to abide by that and only reach out or seek out candidates who meet our qualifications. You can present it in different ways, but again, if it's our policy that they have to have this credential, then they have to have the credential. But you can also put it as it's preferred but not required, or strongly recommended, as you see in other job positions. But with our policy being written the way it is, it would absolutely be required, and there would be no preference or way to get around having that doctorate degree.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Parliamentarian Duncan, do we need a vote?
Or we can do it by consensus. Pam, if I don't hear any, can we just say it's consensus or what's the best way to do that? Pam was thinking about it.
She might be muted.
Yeah. She's thinking about whether we want to take a vote or just run it by consensus. Okay.
Are you unmuted?
Sorry.
Okay. So what I was saying, sorry about that, is that because the policy is the standing policy, you're not really taking any action other than to say you're going to abide by the policy you have. So if you were going to change it, you would need a vote to do so. But because it is the policy as written, you will abide by that.
All right. Thank you. The next items on the agenda, Pam, they may be for you. Is that correct? Some things we need to do. And then Brianna has some other things at the end about the timeline. So
actually, the next item on the agenda is for Board Liaison Hannah Rivera, and it is the charge to the committee.
thank you.
Yes, so the charge to the committee is posted there and on board for everyone to review. I'm not going to read it word for word today because it's rather long, but what I would like to ask the committee members to do is take a look at that, make sure that they are comfortable with that charge, and we will actually review that charge in depth at our next meeting with our consultants. A few things I will just highlight that the charge asks the committee to adopt a timeline, which we will review in this meeting, and again ask for feedback on that to be solidified at our next meeting. We will ask that committee members abide by strict confidentiality. We're actually going to have committee members sign a confidentiality agreement. We will identify qualities for the next president, one of which we've already taken care of, saying that we are going to stick to our policy as it is, requiring a doctorate degree. We will recommend a leadership advertisement. We will work with the consultants to make this a national search. The committee will present a list of unranked candidates who are most qualified for selection as the next president. The committee will be willing to meet with the board, the full board as necessary after interviews with the finalists to determine the final appointment. Committee members need to understand that this is an ongoing commitment over the next few months and that meetings will be possibly frequent and your attendance is crucial at those meetings. And lastly, that the committee members will serve without any kind of bias or for or against any prospective candidates. And the committee will promote a diverse candidate pool and, of course, abide by any KCTCS equal opportunity and non-discrimination guidelines. So that is the charge in a nutshell. But again, please take a look at that charge. Be willing at the next meeting to discuss it, make any changes that you feel are necessary to it, or if you don't think that there are any changes necessary to it, be willing to sign off on that as our committee charge for the Presidential Search Committee.
All right. Next item, is that Hannah or is that Pam?
Go ahead.
I can cover that. The next item A there you see on your screen is the voting procedure. This is what Chair Stevens or Co-Chair Stevens for the committee mentioned at the beginning. Statutorily, the Board of Regents must abide by voting procedures laid out by KRS that says our faculty and staff have a vote. But for purposes of this committee, we are going to give everyone who is serving on the committee a full vote. So that means faculty, staff, and students will have one vote, as well as our non-regent members on the committee, Dr. Castle and Dr. Young. They will also have a full vote. And we believe that this is necessary to encourage equal participation and equal say. And then when the the committee makes its recommendations for candidates to the full board, and the full board makes the ultimate decision as to who becomes the next KCTCS president. That is when we will abide by the statutory requirements of half votes for faculty and staff and students, and then appointed regents having a full vote. So again, for committee purposes, everyone has an equal vote. In the final decision, because that is statutorily required by KRS, we will give the appropriate votes for the regents based on their title.
All right, thank you. Now, are we ready? Pam, are you the next one, or is this the?
I believe that I am the next one, confidentiality statements.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would caution this committee and later when it gets to the full board that all of your deliberations, discussions, review of documents, any personal identifying information of candidates, all of that is confidential. It's held confidential because these are people's lives, essentially. They are taking a step to come and apply for this position, and we should hold this promise that we will keep all of their information confidential. So we will be requiring actually that the search committee sign confidentiality statements, and later the board will sign them as well. That you will not, unless legally compelled to do so, talk about any of the candidates or any of the information that was provided to you during this search for the KCTCS president. That your deliberations, and that would include whether the information is provided to you through discussion orally, or whether it is given to you through the form of papers, books, files, any other electronic communications. All of that is confidential, and you will keep all of this to yourself without talking to friends, neighbors, coworkers, etc., so that this process remains with integrity and is not compromised by any leaks. Excuse me. Also, if you are contacted by media, you will not discuss anything that is going on here. You will refer any questions to the co-chairs of this search committee, and the co-chairs will, with consultation with the search firm and board liaison Rivera, will determine whether any authorization will be permitted to speak to the media, and that will come in the form of written authorization. Also, your obligations to maintain confidentiality and unauthorized contact with the media and other third parties will exist after the search is over, so that it is something that you will be bound to about candidates who were unsuccessful. Even about the successful candidate or the finalist, you should not be discussing why one was chosen over another, etc. Additionally, you should remember that any breach to this confidentiality might compromise this search, and we would have to start the process all over again. So I caution you to ensure that you do not put the institution at risk for any sort of defamation claims, breach of privacy claims, or any other types of claims by talking about this. And I know that you will not, but this is our duty to tell you. Additionally, it will be your duty to sign a confidentiality form, and Amy Jennings will be circulating those through DocuSign, so you will be able to sign those electronically, and we will keep them on file. Any questions about the confidentiality agreement?
Dr. Casey?
Hey, just need to clarify something. When we're talking through teams, or when you're actually having discussions about individual candidates, will those meetings be in person? Or are we planning on doing these all on Teams?
You can do them in via Teams, but that will be in closed session. So as soon as we start talking about actual candidates and actual people who have applied, that will have to be in closed session. Now, whether it will be Teams or the committee will be in person, that will be determined by availability, but definitely you will not be streamed.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to add that that component of a closed search, we believe working with our consultants is crucial to get our top rated candidates to apply. There are such things as open searches where, if anyone applies, their name is listed out there and everyone can know that they have applied and they're interested. But we believe that's not what's best to get those really top rated candidates to apply. So we will keep this confidential, and the search committee will pick top 2 or 3 candidates and then recommend those names to the full board, who will also keep those names confidential. But then there may be a press release or something like that to say that they're in the top candidates when we get to that point. But just so everyone knows, this will be considered a closed search until we do reach those final candidates.
And remember to all the committee members, if you have any questions, please call Hannah or Pam. If you send an email, just send it to Hannah or Pam. Don't send it to anyone else if you have the questions in that regard. There's going to be a lot of questions I think that we can answer when we meet with the consultants. But Brianna's going to talk about if you're done the timeline. And we want to talk about that before we leave.
Well,
Pam?
we have a couple of more agenda items,
Okay.
but I would like to add to this one item that we just discussed. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Some of you may be familiar with the one preferred candidate type of search that has been done in the past. That, as Board Liaison Rivera said, that is not what AGB will be doing. This search is a top 3 candidate search. So those 3 candidates will be made, if there are 3 candidates at the end, those will be made available for public forums, etc. So for those who are listening in, this is not a top 1 candidate, preferred candidate search.
And Pam, I understand from the consultants, the committee will have access to all of the applications that meet the requirements, correct? And the committee will be the ones to review each and every one of those qualified applicants that the search firm moves forward, correct?
That is correct. And those will be kept confidential as we discussed. But it will only be those candidates that meet the minimum qualifications.
Yes, ma'am.
So the next, actually, Chair Stevens and Chair Whitten, the next item is the implicit bias training. So I do want to comment on this. Each of the search committee members and then later the board members will need to go through implicit bias training. And that is essentially a training that I will provide for you. Part of it will be a video and part of it will be something that I will directly address with you. But basically, it will go over the fact that there are certain biases that we have for almost everything in life that we may not be aware of. And those come from our past experiences. They could come from growing up in the South. They could come from growing up in the North. They could come from being a man. They could come from being a woman. So where they come from is just about the bundle of wonderfulness that creates each and every one of us. So we will be talking about those, and we will be talking about the anti-discrimination laws that are out there, both federal and state, and talking about prohibited questions that you are not able to ask candidates. So be prepared for that. I will be sending out information on that within the next 2 weeks, and we will proceed from there. And then the rest of the board will take it prior to getting the 3 candidates.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Okay, I think that is the last item is, Brianna, is that you have, and the last item, there's 2 or 3 of them together. So Brianna, I'll let you go from there, what you and I have discussed, and see if the committee, we can work toward a better solution. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So if everyone has this, like, I think everybody has access to this and on board, correct? The timeline. I mean, I can see it. I'm just hoping I'm not the only one seeing it. Okay. So if we take a look at the timeline in the board book and kind of the stakeholder input discussion, we're going to kind of mesh those together. If you look at our timeline, it is a quick timeline. So, you can see where we are today. And then also just kind of to keep everybody on track, we've also included the meetings, the policy and planning committee meeting, the board meetings when we all meet together again as a group. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but just some things that I want to point out, I feel that are high notes to make sure that we're aware of. The 31st, June 1st, 2nd, 5th, and 6th, as needed. The listening sessions with groups and open forums of different stakeholders, KCTCS stakeholders, state and federal lobbyists, the legislator, the governor's office, CPE, and so on, to kind of see where they are coming from and what they feel is needed for this position moving forward. And then the advertisement, we will receive that advertisement on the 13th. And I'm sorry, I probably should back up a little bit on no, that's position expectations. We're moving that forward. And then the Board of Regents meeting, of course, June 15th and 16th. And there is potential, Chair Stevens and I have discussed, kind of based on the feedback that we received during those listening sessions, there is potential, perhaps, Chair Stevens, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe that morning of the 15th, the Thursday of the board meeting, perhaps to have maybe like a 10 o'clock or an 11 o'clock quick meeting, just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page and kind of have seen the feedback that we've have received up to that point, and then go ahead and conduct the meeting. Chair Stevens, that's correct, right? That there's potential for that. Yes. The morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
Okay, and then as you can see in here, other timeline events are still ongoing, the chancellor search and so forth. But the search system office is going to post on June 19th, and then applications accepted, and then the deadline and moving forward. And then that we will receive access to applications in the candidate materials folder portal. Can either Parliamentary Duncan or Board Liaison Rivera, can you talk about that software we'll be using for that?
Sure, I can do that. That will all be handled by the consultants. They have their own AGB portal, which they utilize. We will advertise it on we already have set up a KCTCS. I don't want to quote it because I know I'll get it wrong, but it's something like kctcs.presidentialsearch.edu, I believe, site, in case people are out there, Googling KCTCS president application, but it will basically redirect them to submit their application through AGB. That is something that our consultants recommended, and that they handle it rather than anyone internally handling the applications, so that they will do the initial screening to ensure qualifications are met. And I just want to back up for just a second to talk about the listening sessions. I don't want the search committee to believe that they are in charge of conducting those listening sessions. That will all be handled by our consultants. They will either do those via survey, via phone calls, or Teams meetings, or possibly even in-person meetings to get that feedback, and then deliver that information to the search committee, so that the onus is not on you to conduct those meetings, but rather our search consultants will be handling those for you.
Let me ask a question, Hannah. Would it be possible that the committee could have that information prior, and that's what Brianna was asking, I think, prior to the June meeting, so we could review that and then the board make that public to the board? This is what we have.
I believe so. I don't want to sign our consultants up for anything before speaking with them, but looking at the timeline, it looks like that will be, those sessions will be done early in June. And assuming that there aren't any additional people we want to add to that list, which could be, but I believe they're going to try to have that all wrapped up before our regular June 15th and 16th board meetings, so that they can present kind of an overview of what they've heard from those constituents and stakeholders to the board for their information.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Hannah, for clarifying that. And one more quick question about AGB system. Will we all be given then, since it's going to kind of be locked in-house with them, will we be given credentials that'll all be set up for the members of the search committee?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And just also to piggyback on what you said about the listening sessions, one of the things that I had concern about, and Joe, that might be why Joe's hands popped up. As many of you know, faculty contracts are typically 10-month contracts. I do know that some faculty have a tendency to not check their email as often during summer months. So my goal was, or my question rather, was to see if we can make sure that maybe if we are going to do it by email, that is kind of sent out prior to the end of May, because that will be the end of the 10-month contract for faculty. I mean, are there thoughts on that, or have you guys already started formulating that?
Yes. Chancellor Williams has already reached out to Faculty Senate and Academic Council to ensure that at least the representatives on those groups know that they will be reached out to possibly during the summer for their feedback if we don't make that end of May initial communication. And I know that at least some of them have agreed to be available throughout the summer to offer feedback and input. The unfortunate part is, unless we wanted to delay this until August or September, we have the faculty back on campus full time. And then, of course, those first few weeks, they are completely preoccupied with other matters, which they should be. We can't carry on this search. So we're going to move forward as best we can, but we've already reached out to those important stakeholders and asked for them to be available when we need them so they can supply the feedback.
Thank you. And that's the thing. I think this committee, I would assume, would agree as well, just to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that our faculty and staff all have the opportunities for feedback as well. Even if that means, perhaps at the next meeting, if we can get folks to, if folks are online watching, that we can mention that it's going to be released this day and so forth. So,
yes.
Chair, Parliamentarian Duncan, did you have your hand up? I think I saw it go up and I saw it maybe disappear.
I did have it up, but Hannah said exactly what I was going to say.
Joe, you had a question?
Just quick, on June 19th, it says Chancellor search launched. I'm assuming that means presidential search launch, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not the Chancellor we're starting a search on, it's the President.
Presidential search.
Correct.
Okay.
I know that will need to be changed.
Yeah.
I see that.
And Hannah, I would ask you to reach out next week, or you're Pam 1, to the firm and say, okay, we need to get those questions out, ready to go, and this and that, as Brianna says. And you know, I'm sure I'm sure the system office will provide a list of who the stakeholders are. So, you know, basically, we have to work with them, but you know, the sooner we can get the information to them, the sooner they can put the questions and get it out and get the results back. And hopefully our goal is to have that to present to the committee prior to the June meeting and then present to the full board. Right, Brianna?
That's correct, Chair. Yes.
I think
And I
the
mean,
ones that are really interested in the process, they'll keep an eye on their email.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so you all can see that the timeline is pretty quick. Once all that gets going and the advertisements listed and the search is opened, the timeline to turn around is pretty quick. And then we get to the end of August. So this is the week of August 23rd. This is the final page. I don't know if I can see you guys in a corner of my screen, but I'm just going off of Onboard right now. But we've got, our semifinalist selection, and then of course questions offered for the semifinalists and the top three. That's correct at that time?
Hello.
And then AGB begins their diligence, and then moving forward, the week of September 5th. So you can see, the end of August, 1st of September, we're going to be kind of meeting or in touch regularly. Chair, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. And their proposal, you see the end, the bottom line, what Brianna and I think you and I have talked about, we would like to have most of the work done by this committee and what procedure we work through with the consultants, so we can present some candidates for selection of president of KCTCS and by the September meeting. So, you know, they had it on theirs that they presented and it came back a week later or so. So you correct me if I'm wrong, Brianna, but I think that's what we talked about, correct?
That's correct.
Try to do that timeline from August the 11th to having the committee work and do the procedures or so, and have some candidates, if the board members were made aware of, that we at our regular board meeting in September, in which Hannah has already recommended, and I think we have concurred with, will be in Versailles, that we hopefully will have some candidates to present to the board for their consideration at the September board meeting, hopefully. Correct?
That's correct on mine, Chair. Yeah. Is there anything
So-
else to add? Sorry.
Can I encapsulate your discussion, co-chairs,
Please.
just to ensure that we
Does
have
that
it?
does that big word mean summarize? Can I summarize what you, Brianna, said?
That
Okay, yes,
that is
yes,
what
you
I
can.
would like to do if
Okay, yes,
if
ma'am,
so.
you can.
Okay.
You can.
So one thing I believe that co-chair Stevens asked about previously was whether during the month of July, the search committee could have at least one update meeting as to what the search firm is doing and where we're progressing. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the other information that you indicated previously is that you would like to ask AGB about essentially moving the end of the search to September 21, 22, the Board of Regents meeting, so that there would not be a separate board meeting in the week of September 26 to 29. So that would mean that accordingly, several of the weeks or days might need to be moved up prior to that. Is that correct?
Brianna, isn't that correct?
Okay, so I'm sorry. I want to make sure that I'm following you, Pam. So we're saying that the finalist KCTCS office visits, that's the line I'm looking at. You're saying that would be
Yes.
moved up during the Board of Regents meeting that week?
That is what your co-chair, Chair Stevens, indicated earlier, and I thought that I heard it being discussed in the meeting here.
Okay.
I think my perception was the final three candidates, and it's up to the board of when they want to do this. But we would already, sometime prior to the September meeting, Brianna, if you correct me if I'm wrong, the 3 or 4 candidates are announced. They do their open house, or they do their presentation to the faculty and staff and this and that, and then those 3 or 4, ever how many is, applicants would be interviewed by the full board in the September meeting. Brianna,
Right.
am I correct? Yes.
No, right. That's correct. I just wanted to make sure I was correct there. So my other question then would be, would it be possible then, Pam, I guess, to kind of combine, like maybe not the week of September 8th, but if we're looking at a calendar, if my computer will cooperate here. So we're looking at September, come on, computer. September, the finalists select unranked then. So that week of the 11th, I mean, so Chair Stevens, we're asking the candidates to be the finalists, right? The ranked finalists to be available the week of the board meeting, correct? The 21st and the 22nd.
For an in-person interview by the Board of Regents, for an in-person interview. Yes, ma'am.
So I would caution. I understand the urgency with which we want to move here. I would caution changing the timeline too much, because we have worked with the consultants on this. I think that their approach was, we're going to have a busy September agenda regardless of the search. Of course, we have agenda items that have to be dealt with at our board meeting outside of the search. So we don't want the search process to consume our September board meeting. So I believe that the September 26th through the 29th date and all of those items they have listed therein could be conducted virtually, possibly. But I think that the important part is to know that all of this is somewhat flexible. Depending on how many candidates we get, if we, there may be a need to hold it open a few days longer. I don't think any of this is set in stone. But if we do want to talk about with the consultants at our next meeting on May 26th, moving those September 26th and 29th dates up, we can do that. But I do think they wanted to set aside specific time outside of the board meeting to meet with the finalists and have this kind of separate from the regular business of the board.
So Hannah, I have a follow-up question, because I did not go through the last presidential search. So, and I don't think many of the people on here did as well. There's a handful, maybe half and half.
Sure.
So when we're talking about a separate finalist visit, Chair Stevens is talking about making sure that the full board has the opportunity to be present in those final interviews.
Absolutely.
So would that need to be another? I mean, my question kind of at this point is, I mean, I know we've got our board meeting set 21st, 22nd, and it's on everybody's calendar, but it seems to me the obvious, very quick solution would be to flip flop those weeks. Would that be something that can be put up for consideration?
So the committee would have the finalists, the top 3 selected before the board meeting that week of September 8th.
Okay.
And then once we have the committee chooses its top 3, AGB actually has to do a little further research, and that's where they do the background checks, they make the reference calls, they dig deeper to find out any information that the full board might need before making its selection. So they will need time to conduct that work. And that's why they were saying they were not sure if they could have it done by the September 21st and 22nd Board of Regents meeting. It may need to happen the following week. And then, of course, you have to give the finalists time to travel in to the system office and be there in person if that's the way we wish to do it, which is probably the best way. But again, this is flexible. We can kind of work with the search consultants on this, but they will need time between the committee saying, here are our top 3 candidates, and then time to do a little bit of further research, make sure all of those candidates are thoroughly vetted, so that when those top 3 candidates are presented to the board, we can have any information that we may need for the full board to make its selection.
Hannah, if you would, the first item on the agenda after the roll call of the next meeting with the consultants, let's try to get that resolved.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that we can do that, and you're going to work with him about the stakeholders survey, this and that. Joe, you've been very patient. You want to ask a question?
I was just going to comment. Just kind of go along with what Hannah was saying. I was part of the last presidential search, and it was a long process. It was long days of going through that. I think it should be separate from the board meetings. We have fiduciary responsibility to get done in our board meetings. So I just caution of combining those together, I think would be ill-advised in my opinion.
But Joe, don't you agree that they should be in person?
Yes, definitely in person. Yep.
Because
100%.
they were virtual last time, and I do not think they were as effective. So
well, they did too. We had virtual videos, and then we did have 3 finalists that did come in person, and that was the long days that took forever. It seemed like forever. It wasn't forever.
Yeah. Pam, you had a question?
But
Yeah.
even some of the board members, some of the board of regents were virtual.
Correct. I think everyone should be there, in my opinion, of regents, if they can. I know everyone's pretty busy, but it's kind of a big deal.
Yes.
I think it's important that we should carve out time.
Yes. And Brianna, and our thought was, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Brianna, is that it's usually the board sessions are a day and a half. It's maybe making the board regents meeting instead of a day and a half meeting, 2.5 days, so that we had opportunity. But, I agree that we need to figure out some way, and I'm sure the consultants will work with us and we can do that. Pam, you had a question. Sorry. Go ahead.
So before Board Liaison Rivera and I communicate with AGB, I'd like to get to the core of what your concerns are about the meetings, because if we can articulate the concerns, then perhaps they will be better able to fashion a solution. If the concern is that back-to-back meetings on each of these weeks will reduce attendance in person, then we can certainly work with them to determine, for instance, whether we could have we could reschedule our regular board meeting. It would become a special board meeting and could be in October. I'm not saying these are solutions. I just need to know if that is the core or the heart of your concern, that people need to be there in person, and 2 weeks in a row might be too much away from work for people who are working.
Yeah, I think that was the initial concern when Chair Stevens and I spoke on the phone about the back-to-back timeline. Everybody's time, of course, is precious, but it was something that we both felt was important, as Barry said, to make sure that when we do conduct those interviews of the finalists, that they see a in-person presence, that they know what, so to speak, that they're walking into, right? Who they're going to be working with in that capacity. So, and I thought, for several of our members that, those back-to-back weeks and just the strain that does put on the work board service balance could be pretty strenuous. So, I really like the idea, Chair Stevens, that Pam just put out, the idea of perhaps moving the September board meeting to October. With that, what's the consensus of that? I guess that at this point, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, and Chair Stevens doing a lot of talking, and Pam's telling us what we can and can't do. But what is the rest of the board? How do you, the rest of the search committee, Dr. Young or Dr. Castle or anybody else? How do you feel about that?
Personally, since we wouldn't be a part of that particular meeting, I think that would be up to you all. I do empathize with Regent Heerdink, and that being a part of searches prior to, before, they can be long. And so I would be very concerned about trying to combine the two. And then also, just making sure that we have enough time to do what needs to be done without rushing the process is also a consideration of mine. But I think whatever you all choose to do, we'll work to make it work. But that is going to be a long time for you.
Brianna, I cannot read the timeline. So after our September meeting of meeting the candidates, the 3 candidates, what is the next step? When do we make our decision?
So go ahead, Pam, please.
So the September 26th and 29th, is that when you're talking about the interviews? You make it immediately that day.
Okay.
Yes, we would have a decision, Barry, by the 29th.
Let me throw something out, Pam, and I'm looking. The applications closed to them on August 11th. Now that is 1, 2, 3, and if you even after Labor Day that's 4, 5 weeks prior, 5.5 weeks prior to the board meeting. Mm-hmm. I'm saying or my thought, and I haven't talked to consultants about this. My thought is that what Brianna and I talked about was having this committee, the committees to start getting to, after the applications close, to have a committee meeting sometime the last part of August to try to screen some of the applicants. And we may have to, depending on how the committee feels, we may have to have 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings to get it down to 3 or 4.
And that's August 23rd, Chair Stevens.
Yeah. And that would give us, and again, it's a long process, but I'm going to say something, and we need to find the right person, but we need a president for KCTCS. And, basically we've got other things, college presidents got other things, this and that. We don't want to rush. We want to do, as Pam reminds me, due diligence, but we want to find someone and to put them, because remember in September, not only at that board meeting, we're going to get a big, and I won't say information from Huron. So,
right.
My hope is that we have a president, it's ASAP, right, as soon as that's possible after that meeting.
So what I would recommend to this committee is that, in this meeting, we could go over multiple iterations of how the timeline should be. But I think the concerns that you have addressed, we should take to the professionals that you are actually paying to do this search for you. And so we take these concerns about, I have them all written down from previous discussion with the chair, with Chair Stevens. I had hoped to speak with Co-Chair Witten today, but it was way too busy. So I will take what I have there, take what we have discussed here. Board Liaison Rivera and I will get together, and we will go to those people that you are actually paying to create these timelines for you. And then we will get it back to you. If it's still not where you want it to be, we will continue to sharpen and pare and determine how it should be. But I really think you should rely on the search firm that KCTCS is paying to do that difficult chess game for you.
We do. I agree. Brianna?
In agreement. Yep.
Yes.
Regent Fletcher? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
do have one concern, and that is that whoever is walking into this role is not going to have all of the data to really, we're going to be asking these very high level candidates to come in and have some strategic plan, or at least some ideas about a strategic plan or what they see as the priorities moving KCTCS forward. But we're not even going to have all of our data at this point. It just sounds, and I understand the need to have a president in place, but even if we announce the finalists in September, it's going to be unlikely that that person is going to be able to start before January, if not even June of the following year. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that and knowing that, we're going to interview someone who's basing their opinions on what they think they know about KCTCS, but there's a lot of unknown data still out there.
Yes, ma'am. Barry, you had a question?
I just think that time frame between getting the information for us and making the decision, it would be good. Maybe if we could use the 2 days in September for the interviewing the candidates and then have our board meeting in October, that would give us, instead of doing the reverse, because then you're postponing selecting a president another month, potentially.
Well, we'll let I think that Hannah and Pam have put it back on the consultants' back is let them are concerned and see what their best recommendations are coming forth, and we will have them in person at the next meeting. And so if we've got any other questions or concern, we can ask them that. Brianna, what do you think about that?
I'm in agreement. That's fine.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, Keith?
Yeah, quick question. So I would think there'd be some value in the team getting together prior to the interview process to make sure we all are consistent from the standpoint of the types of questions we're going to ask, the due diligence we're going to ask, the depth of what we're going to ask, to just make sure there's no holes in what we could potentially present and question them about. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, Hannah, correct, right?
Absolutely. And I just also want to say that the last thing on the agenda, the stakeholder input discussion, we do, if you look in the timeline, there are some stakeholders listed, some of whom we've already discussed in this meeting, like the faculty. But I would really appreciate everyone on the committee reviewing that. And if there are other people that we need to add to the list, that you be prepared to recommend that at the next meeting. And again, our search consultants will be responsible for reaching out to those parties and getting their input. But I think the wider of a net we can cast to get input about what is needed in the next president, the better off we will be. So let's take a look at that and make sure that we have all of our bases covered.
Thank you. Any other Randy, got another question?
Again, not to belabor the point, but do the people who are going to be interviewing for this job understand that there's a possibility that with this SJR out there, this may look totally different in 6 months?
Great question.
I'm very nervous about that joint resolution. I really am. And I don't know where CPE is in their data collection, but I have real concerns, and I feel like we're almost setting someone up for failure to come in not knowing what that's going to look like in December.
Sure. That is something that we can absolutely discuss more in depth with the consultants, but Pam and I and Chair Stevens met with them a few weeks ago, had a very frank discussion about not only SJR 98, but about the Huron study, even performance funding, all of the opportunities that the system is presented with right now. I will say opportunities instead of obstacles, but you can, yeah, yes. And we laid it out on the table for the search consultants. We then followed up with an actual document stating all of those with the timeline, the SJR 98 timeline in December, the Huron June timeline for the board meeting, and then the second part of the Huron study following in September, so that they could have all of that to discuss with respective candidates. But again, at this point, not knowing what CPE is going to be recommending or what the General Assembly may do when they come into session in January, it is a bit of a guess right now what our future will look like. But I think that the best we can do at this point is move forward. And I think we all can agree that it's crucial our next president be somewhat of a visionary and a strong leader. And so that's what we're going to be looking for.
So, Hannah, I have a follow-up to that then. I mean, this is just me playing devil's advocate. That's what I do, English person here. So did AGB give you or Parliamentarian Duncan any idea of whether they thought, what Regent Fletcher's saying? Do we think that that we should be pushing this aggressively, or what were, since we are, kind of deferring to them on a lot of things here. So did they have any comments about that?
They understood, Chair Stevens. I think everyone.
I wasn't in that meeting, so that's why I asked. Can I be in those meetings in the future, please?
Sure. That was, initial conversation. So,
Right.
But I think Chair Stevens had expressed his desire to have this done yesterday. There was feedback from the consultants on that, saying that, the timeline they've put forward, which we just took an initial look at, is aggressive by their standards. So even meeting that end of September deadline, understanding that if we do meet that, then it may be January or even, early spring, early summer before the finalist, if that person is working elsewhere, can transition and become president. So those are all factors we have to consider. What transpires between now and, say, January of 2024 or early spring of 2024, that's anyone's best guess at this point. So I don't think it's in our best interest to delay this process until all of the cards fall and we see where we are. I think we have to move forward. But they understand that there are a lot of unknowns, and they will express those to the candidates and to the finalists, and really look for a candidate who is willing to take on that kind of position where there are so many opportunities and unknowns, and they're willing and open and ready to take on that challenge.
So they didn't really necessarily imply that all of these moving parts, these opportunities, as you mentioned earlier, are going to be detrimental to the search, that they're worried about the number and or type of candidates that we're going to receive?
They have not expressed that concern, no, but they understand the issues and the concerns. They have not said, okay, with all of this going, this is going to be a failed search, or good luck, like you're never going to find a candidate. They haven't said anything like that. And I fully believe that if anyone can do a national search and be successful, it is the consultants that we have on board with us. And it's frankly this committee. So I know you all are just as eager to find someone to lead the system as we are. But yeah, I mean,
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think this is our opportunity to shine. I think that what the AGB, what the Senate and House is doing, and what CPE is going to be doing, I think we could be the tone setter if we can find the right person. And I think we could dictate how our future is with the right person. I think the longer we linger and the less positive that we can spend this job, the less likely we are going to get that person that can lead us. So I really feel like the conversations ought to be more of, we need to expeditiously find the right person that can take us to the promised land versus sit and watch somebody else demolish us. Because I think the state and the governor is really looking for us to help lead the way for workforce development and education. That's what I think.
So if I could comment, I'm trying to rack up all the comments I want to make. I want to go back to Regent Hamilton's question or comment about questions that should be asked of the candidates, et cetera. So under the September 8th on that search committee meeting, that is part of that meeting agenda there. So you will be talking about questions that should be asked, should not be asked, potentially even follow-up questions and who will be asking what, that sort of thing. So that will be part of that September 8th meeting. Then on the issue of how aggressive the search is and whether there are potential potholes that a car could fall completely into. Yes, there are. There are lots of things going on in that initial meeting with AGB. As Hannah said, we did provide all of the possibilities that are out there. And there were a few comments about the overall difficulty of searches in the entire United States right now, pointing to Florida, pointing to KSU. So they actually have done some searches in Kentucky. They have done some searches in this region. They've done them all over the United States, and every state is suffering from many of these same issues that we are. So they are prepared to navigate through those issues. Now, I believe that they think that this time frame is aggressive, as Board Liaison Rivera said. So I cannot say that they will be terribly excited about truncating it even further. They would probably rather spread it out a little more, but we will take all of these concerns back to them from you, and we will try to figure out a revised timeline to give to you. And Co-Chair Witten, yes, you may be on those discussions. The first discussion that we had was actually pre-committee formation, so nobody had been named yet.
That's fine. I'll let y'all do the hard lifting first.
When is Pam? When is the consulting group? When do they want us to have 3 candidates ready to interview?
So in the timeline, they are hoping for selection of the finalists in that September 8th meeting. And then in between that, they do their due diligence. As Hannah pointed out, they have to do all sorts of searches. For instance, they go on PACER, which is the federal court filing site. So they will go on there. They will look in social media. They will check references, all of that. And then they will come back with those finalists for interviews September 26th and 29th. So they really only have from September 8th, when this committee narrows down to the 3 finalists, they really only have 2.5 weeks to get to the finalist interviews.
Okay. So that would mean if they find something in between that 2.5 weeks, that would reset those 3 candidates if we scheduled them for the September board meeting, to replace the September board meeting with interviewing the candidates, right?
Correct, but understand that they're going to be doing different levels of due diligence. So they will have already done some on the, as each candidate comes in and applies, they will also do them on the semifinalist, and then they'll do it on the finalist. So I wouldn't say it is unlikely or improbable that they would find something, but it's kind of rare that they find something in that stage that would knock them off, but they still need to do it to ensure that we get the best candidate.
Any other questions or comments?
And so between now and our next meeting on May 26th, if you do have concerns or just comments, I think that General Counsel Duncan has been taking notes, and I've been making some notes over here. So if you have anything else you want us to keep track of, please send them to us, and we will share them with the consultants, and then we can bring a closure to the timeline and to anything else that we may need to, like the charge, for our next meeting on May 26th.
Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none, I'm ready to adjourn this meeting unless any other conversations or comments. Pam?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, by consensus.
Thank you all for attending. God bless you. Have a happy Mother's Day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Yes, thank you.